Helen considered herself very lucky with her life. She had a loving husband, Ben, with whom she had been together since university. When Helen gave birth to a daughter, Ben, realizing that it would be hard for the family to live on his salary only, decided to go into business together with his friend. He had been fond of fishing and hiking since childhood. So, having decided to use their own experience, the companions chose the trade of outfit for outdoor activities and sports. Unexpectedly for many, the business turned out to be profitable, and after the first store, the companions opened the second one, significantly expanded the assortment, and even organized manufacture of goods for tourism. Helen did not stay long in the status of a housewife, and with the support of her husband, opened a store with sewing products. They did not become millionaires, of course, but the financial prosperity of the family was stable. The really big money came suddenly when Ben, having rationally assessed the situation on the market, bought several land plots for almost nothing, and then successfully sold them. Thus, Helen's husband got another profitable business, a real estate agency. Years passed, and Helen and Ben turned from poor young specialists into very well-off people. They built a large, comfortable house not far from the city and bought a spacious apartment for their daughter Zoe, who was already a college student. Many things had changed in their lives, but Helen and Ben's feelings remained the same, affectionate, and their love became even stronger. But 2 years ago, an accident happened to Ben, and Helen became a widow. The man failed to drive on an icy road and died on the spot. The woman could hardly find the strength to move on. Trying to hold on for the sake of her daughter, and to distract herself from her sorrowful thoughts, she began to delve into her husband's business and did everything to keep it in the memory of him. Such a full workload helped the woman to tire herself out to the point that she didn't have the strength to mourn her beloved. However, sometimes Helen was really depressed, and during such time she did not even leave the house. Thankfully, it was possible to supervise the business remotely. The only people Helen was always happy to see were her daughter Zoe and her husband's sister Kelly and her family. Kelly often came to visit her brother's widow, and they had long heart-to-heart talks. "You know, Kelly, if it weren't for Zoe and you, I probably wouldn't be alive in this world anymore," Helen confessed one day. "We all feel bad without Ben, but he wouldn't like your thoughts, Helen. Especially now Zoe needs you more than ever. She's all grown up, and she's practically a bride," replied Kelly, and smiled. "I saw her yesterday in a cafe with a young man. She was glowing with happiness." Kelly's words made Helen think deeply. It upset her to think that she, immersed in her own affairs, had not noticed such significant changes in her daughter, or rather, simply had not paid attention. She actually saw that Zoe started coming home later, spent more time in front of the mirror dressing up, and recently came to her and asked for her favourite perfume. At that time, Helen just waved her hand toward the dressing table, not even thinking that Zoe might have just been looking for an occasion to talk to her mother. "I'm a terrible mother," Helen said confusedly. "Dear, I think Zoe doesn't hold a grudge against you. She's a smart girl. It's a pity she's still not at home, or we would have asked her about her boyfriend together. But unfortunately, I have to go now," said Kelly. "Why don't you come with your kids and your husband to our place for the weekend then?" "Great! And maybe Zoe will invite her beau too. Let's see what he's like." Helen walked Kelly out and sat down to think about the upcoming conversation with her daughter. The woman knew that Zoe was quite grown up, and having a boyfriend at her age was natural, but she was anxious that her daughter would be caught by some unreliable man. Though, when Ben was still alive, they were often surprised that Zoe grew into a serious person. When their daughter was still in school, she and her husband worried that some classmate would turn her head and she would have problems with her studies. But to their surprise and pride, the girl approached her studies with responsibility and put all her efforts into preparing and entering the university of her choice. Memories of a happy life with her husband reopened Helen's emotional wound, and she, immersed in her thoughts, did not notice how the front door slammed. She only woke up when Zoe came into the kitchen and gently touched her shoulder, and Helen, startled, bustled around the kitchen and started to set the table. She could hardly contain herself from starting to ask her daughter about her boyfriend, but she decided to start from afar. "Kelly's coming over with her family for the weekend. Will you be at the barbecue, or do you have other plans?" Helen hoped the girl would tell her about her acquaintance, and she was right in her hopes. "Mum, I'm going on a date with my boyfriend on Saturday," said Zoe, blushing thickly. "His name is Daniel. He's a cousin of my friend's boyfriend. Don't worry, he's a normal guy. He runs his own furniture store, or rather, his parents have, but they trusted him to run it 6 months ago. He's 30 years old. He was married. No children." Zoe finished and looked at her mother with a satisfied look. Helen saw in her daughter's gaze a challenge and pride, but she did not comment yet to avoid a quarrel. "Why don't you invite your boyfriend over for the weekend to visit us? But of course, I won't rebuke you if you'd rather go out with him." "Mum, you're adorable, but I thought maybe I shouldn't invite Daniel just yet. I'm afraid he'll think I'm rushing him into marriage. Although he's hinted at it more than once, and said he'd like to spend the rest of his life with me. I'd better see him quickly and then return home. I haven't seen Aunt Kelly and her boys for a long time, and I miss them very much." Helen smiled quite a bit. She also thought it was better not to rush and to get to know each other better, and was glad that Zoe was so sensible about the relationship. She asked her daughter to show at least a picture of Daniel, and the girl happily took out her smartphone. Sitting down next to her mother on the sofa, Zoe showed her the photos that they had taken together. Helen looked at them and suddenly realized that she disliked her daughter's boyfriend. He looked quite decent outwardly, but the way he looked at Zoe made Helen doubt the sincerity of his feelings. The next day, Helen called Kelly and told her about her doubts. "You know, this Daniel is quite a nasty type, even though Zoe says he is very nice. No, I should not invite him as a guest, or he will really propose to Zoe in front of us to get her consent, for sure. What a pity that we will not be able to question him," complained a frustrated Helen. "Well then, try to get some information about him somehow," Kelly advised. Helen thought hard about Kelly's words, and it hit her. She found out the address of Daniel's furniture store, and dressed in modest, slightly shabby clothes she usually wore when she worked in the garden, and went to the shop. The saleswoman, a modest-looking girl, tried to be polite in the presence of the unrepresentative visitor, but she could not hide her disappointment completely. The saleswoman, a model-looking girl, tried to be polite in the presence of the unrepresentative visitor, but she could not hide her disappointment completely. "Excuse me, but is it possible to make any discount on this set?" asked Helen. "Unfortunately, we don't have any discounts. You'd better go to another store. All our furniture is exclusive and made in Italy," replied the girl haughtily. Helen pretended not to notice the disdain and asked to arrange a meeting with the director. Eleanor began to argue, but realizing that the visitor would not leave, called the reception desk and a couple of minutes later informed Helen that she could go to the director's office. Helen thanked the girl and went to the office, which turned out to be empty. A few seconds after that, a slightly dishevelled secretary, as model-looking as a saleswoman, came out of the director's office. Helen said hello and made her request for a discount. The secretary snorted unpleasantly and then turned on her heels and looked into the director's office again. "There's a visitor for a discount. May she come in?" she asked. "In about 10 minutes, honey. You know I need to regain my strength," the loud baritone replied. "Make me a strong coffee." "All right, I'll ask her to wait." Helen immediately realized that Zoe's boyfriend was having fun right in the workplace, but still decided to wait for the reception and assess how Daniel behaves with people. After waiting for half an hour, she finally got the attention of the director, but communication with him did not go well from the start, as soon as Helen talked about a discount. "I'm not running a charity," he rudely interrupted the woman. "Go to a market or something where you can buy all the plywood furniture you want. You'll certainly have enough money for it." Helen returned home in a bad mood. In addition to the fact that Daniel, dating her daughter, was not hesitant to have fun with other women, Helen was upset with his attitude towards clients, which spoke of his inability to do business properly. Through her acquaintances, the woman quickly managed to find out that Daniel brought the salon to the brink of bankruptcy in 6 months and owed large sums to creditors. However, he asked recently for a small reprieve, explaining that very soon he would improve his financial situation. Helen told Zoe about everything, and to let her see the true face of her admirer herself, she asked to invite him to a family get-together on Saturday night. The show was fantastic. Daniel, seeing the dressed-up Helen, politely bowed and wanted to kiss her hand, but when he heard her voice, he recognized her as a recent visitor. "Well, Daniel, come in and have a look at my plywood furniture," said Helen with a sneer. A hapless admirer, notwithstanding the shame, immediately left the house, and he was in such a hurry that he almost fell on the flower bed. Even Zoe could not help smiling, watching Daniel's escape, and Helen was glad that she could save her daughter from making a mistake, and was sure that she would still meet a decent man who would love her.